I see no changes. Wake up in the morning and I ask myself, is life worth living? Should I blast myself? I'm tired of being poor and even worse, I'm black. My stomach hurts, so I'm looking for a purse to snatch.
Hello, my name is Corio. I am currently a scholar in the Humanities program with a BA in Sociology. I'll be telling my experience of self, us, and now, which will be talking about my experience of being Asian American and my overall perspective of the Asian American experience in America. The first thing that I'll be talking about is the story of self. The challenge that I was faced was that on my German side, my grandparents were racist and discriminated against minorities, like my sister and I. The choice I made because of their discrimination or racism is that I created projects for History Day, which were based on the Japanese American experience during World War II, which I mainly talked about the internment camps and many of my family, and also like other stories that I heard that happened in the concentration camps, dealing with war resistors, people who were military intelligence, and their experience and how they proved their patriotism. And as a result, I felt like my peers in middle school at the time understood more of my story and even my culture and why and the Japanese American experience. And that my point was basically that all minorities have had struggles, and that, I wanted to have as a result that, we all should fight for equality and justice, that, we all have more similarities than differences, So, getting back to my identity of the story of self, there are many, or the self, this is like the self and us, Basically, there are many Hapas that go through similar experiences as I do, dealing with discrimination, racism, not feeling included, a sense of belonging to a group. And I'll also be sharing like strengths that Hapas have, and basically what Hapa means is being half Asian and half white, or being of Asian descent, or half, So the first example for me was when I was like 5 or 6. It was during Christmas time. So I wanted to build a train set with my German grandfather. And so he basically walked away after I asked, and I just felt like I was distant from him. I felt that like I had done something wrong, It kind of, through this experience, I always felt like I was different, Sometimes growing up, I had to struggle finding my identity, but, like, mainly, I just felt like my grandparents on my white side resented us, and I didn't know why, and so as a result of that, of them being distant, racist, like, I didn't know it at the time when I was younger, but as I got older, I noticed that they treated us differently than my cousins that were full white, and so I tried to, basically be more Japanese or be more engaged in the Asian American community, and sometimes I felt like I didn't belong there too. But then there's other times where I did feel like I fit and had support, and I made the choice of, or I always made the choice of trying to get closer with my family because they're family, my loved ones. But as a result, they just distanced themselves, and I always felt like I failed my white side or my whiteness, but, as I've grown older, I've tried to get closer to both sides, and I'm still seeking my identity, but I am more confident in myself, and I feel like I belong in both groups. You know, this uh, realization of accepting both, it was like kind of saved me. It was like saved me and also didn't save me at times. But I have began to accept who I am, and I have many and have people have many similar stories as I do. There's no single story. You know, not all stories are the same, but we all can have similarities. You know, and I was just accepting of being both. You know, and um, so in contrast of belonging to a group, I would spend more time with my Japanese grandfather, who loved me so much. When I was a kid, I would always run up to him and hug him, and he always accept my hugs, and I felt that I was accepted. I could be who I am. And interestingly, my Japanese side, they wanted to be involved in my life, and my grandfather and I, we're buddies. We're best friends. We'd always find ways to joke with each other, and I miss him. But in the end, I still remember our memories of being little, like just playing games. And I felt like I belonged to my family. And even being mixed race in the Japanese community, I felt like I didn't belong. Most of the time, but as I've grown older, as a result of being engaged in the community, I've gained another family, basically. I've gained support. I found people who love me and my family for who I am. And this brings me to the point of our strengths as a unit or as a collective, that we are we're coming out in media and sharing our own stories, our own experiences. We're talking about, even at my church, as a collective, we're wanting to be more including and not exclusive. So this brings me. So as a result of my story of self, I've loved who I am, and I've loved who I am, and will always be empowered by my identity. So this brings me to the point of story of us. So basically, in America, a lot of Asian Americans have felt like they have had to assimilate to American culture. That's basically our challenge. Well, in media and in literature or other things, there's been many stereotypes or discrimination towards Asian Americans. But the choice that we've made is that we have become empowered educators, directors, movie makers, motivational speakers, telling our story. And as a result, I feel like we're getting equal representation in the media and in movies, and there's people exploring sexuality, because a lot of times in Asian American society, it's hard to talk about sexuality, and we're fighting for equal rights and justice. So talking about sexuality, it's tough for us to express our sexual desires or even our sexual orientation, and even me growing up, I never felt like I was the macho guy as American society has told us to be. But, I have grown to accept that I am, I don't even know, no, I am, I'm just proud of my sexual orientation, and I'm not afraid to talk about my sexual experiences, being open about that, even talking to others and supporting them. You know, and so what gives me a story of strength is that George Takei came out, and I feel like that was a huge leap forward for us. And I feel like as a result of that choice, there are more Asian Americans coming out and not being scared talking about their identity. You know. Um, all right, so to the point of the story of now, I'll be discussing the model minority, or basically summarizing it. Why is it urgent to take on the model minority myth? It is urgent because it doesn't define all of us, since we all have our own story. It basically talks about stereotypes and different races or discrimination toward Asian Americans and puts us in a box. Other cultures emphasize other cultures emphasize similar values as Asian Americans, and we need to basically break the model minority myth because it's not all our own story. What makes it urgent is because it creates it's institutional racism. It basically creates stereotypes in the workforce or other industries. It's basically serving my peers and our community. The strategy to alleviate this is to talk about, or to read literature, listen to other people's stories, look at different narratives, and creating projects that will be inclusive in talking about our stories. And how will you know that this is an effective solution? That people have an understanding or a changed perspective of the Asian American experience. So basically, to sum up my points, basically to alleviate all of the stereotypes of racism is basically have an understanding and having the opportunity to tell our own stories. And, joining my sister's project that is cultivating and ensuring that Japanese Americans still have their culture. So basically, to sum up my points, my challenges were expressing sexuality, racism, and discrimination, the model minority myth, and also belonging and feeling excluded. The choices that I have made was to share my story and asking my peers, or asking you to look at my story. The action that we should take is basically sharing our story and not believing in just one story. Thank you for listening.